Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Lodestar Lending Leaders. We have a special guest today, Melissa Johnson Eldridge, president of NEMA Online Signing Solutions and Consultants, as well as the creator of Remote Online Notary Training. So we're going to talk about all things RON and RIN and e-closing and digital signings and wet signatures and dry signatures, and something that is becoming really, really important in the industry even before COVID. So really excited to kind of dive into this topic because I know very little about most of these acronyms. So Melissa, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I would love to just kind of hear a little bit about your background, what got you to start NEMA, and kind of, how you got into the business in the first place.
Sure. And thank you again, Jim, for having me. So just a little bit about my background. I was originally a transplant from Louisiana. Came out here because of opportunity, working with some federal government agencies. I have a background in a master's degree in criminal law. And after I decided to leave some of the federal agency government jobs, I broke off as a teacher and decided to do supplemental income as a notary. And after I dove into just, researching notary, dived into the online notarization world, and I just really became just amazed with how things were changing very quickly and notarizing documents. And so I worked for a company here locally for the summertime as a teacher, and then decided to branch off on my own. And doing so many other notaries and other, titles and lenders wanted to know more about this whole e-close process, the online notarization process, which led me to in teaching online notarization. And so that was kind of like the beginning of where we are today with, becoming an online notary expert, service provider, as well as an, teacher for online notarization.
And that's great. I really like how you kind of married the educational component as well as the technical component as well. So now instead of teaching school kids, you're teaching title agents, which is probably a lot harder.
It is.
Anyways.
Absolutely.
So if a title agent, if someone comes to you, say, hey, I want to do e-closings now, I want to do remote online notarization, how do I get started?
So, that's a great question, Jim, because one of the things we always talk to our titles about online notarization or e-closing, there's two different aspects, from an e-close to an online notarization, right? And e-closing basically can still happen with the same, workflow process of utilizing a mobile notary with an electronic tablet or computer to go out and perform it mobile and have them to e-sign it. Versus online notarization, that's where everything is completely online. And that's when we utilize a commission online notary to perform the actual duties of notarizing.
So they're not in the same place. Is that a true remote online notarization? They're not in the same place?
That is correct. That the signer can be anywhere.
Assisted one is what, like a hybrid then would be?
That's correct. Okay. That's correct. Correct. And that's important to know because traditional notaries can perform e-closings. Is not required to have a commission online notarization commission through the state. However, online notaries must have a commission through the state. So those are things too that we have to educate titles and lenders about. Just not any notary that you assign can perform an online notary. They must have their commission through their states to do so.
And it can't be done in all states.
And it cannot be done in all states. Yeah. So you definitely have to go by the notary law per state.
And I believe I think Virginia was one of the first states to adopt.
Absolutely was.
Right. And if you're a notary sitting in Virginia, does that mean that you can do closings all throughout?
Well, so that is left up. Yes, Virginia notaries can definitely do so. There's different laws per state that each notary must abide by to perform an online notarization. However, if there is a lender or title who says, we can waive the stamp showing another state, right? A Texas notary stamp, because Texas has some laws also that allow some wavering in there, or Florida, then it still is left up to the actual document receiver. So if the person who's receiving a document is saying, I'm okay with a Florida stamp, or I'm okay with a Virginia or Texas stamp, then that's fine too. So it just depends on exactly what they're going to be using those documents for, and who's going to be the one retrieving the documents.
And who would set that? Would that be something the lender would determine?
The lender, as well as the clerk, the county clerk as well, because if they are recording these documents, it has to, again, to be received by the clerk or the county. And so they would have to make sure that they can receive those documents.
Interesting. So it's really important then to figure out where you're closing. So do you see title agents to start kind of pick? Oh, no problem. For title agents who start, then do you see them pick a set area to kind of implement and go in, or a set lender? Like, what's the easiest way to begin?
So definitely they want to first make sure that the state allows online notarization, that the clerks, the counties are accepting, e-signatures and e-notarizations as well. But it should, in my experience, if the lenders are accepting the actual documents, then it make it easier for title to adjust. So mostly starting with the lender, right? And if the lender is open to online notarization, he has a workflow process. He's already selected, platform. He's done his research. More important, if there's an e-vault involved for the lenders, because that's where they want to start to be able to process an e-note, then lenders are more, they gravitate to it first. So from a marketing perspective, you definitely want to educate the lenders and have those readily accessible tools for lenders. And then titles can kind of like match what their lenders are looking for. So, definitely start with your lender side. And then if you start with title, then you want to, just start with the title, knowing what all research they've already done and how many products that the lender is looking to utilize for an online notarization.
One thing I was a title agent for a while and in title agent sales, and I found trying to get a lender to use a specific technology is like wagging the dog by the tail. But you can just never, like, ultimately you have to kind of use or work with whatever they're doing for sending orders or transmitting documents or whatever. I'm hearing that's kind of the same with online notarization. So what is that looking like then? Like, what platforms are being used? What questions do you as a title agent need to ask?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because things have been done traditionally so much. And the change in online notarization definitely does require a lot of workflow processes. So one of the things that, I encourage title to do is have these conversations with their lenders first, because online notarization definitely will speed up the process for returning documents, returning the notes, funds, wiring, all of that. However, everyone already had traditional workflow processes in place. So I don't know if there's ever a good time to just slow down and implement, but at some point you have to slow down and implement the technology. I think what happens, or what we see the most, is having those structures put in place. One of the things that NEMA have been very creative in doing in the industry is going in and working with lenders and titles to talk about what is it that you need in place, what type of support systems you need in place, what type of support team you need in place to help you create a workflow implementation where it does not disturb or distract what you already have going on. And usually, in that concept, we're able to work out something, build a team to help the lenders, build a team to help title, to help the transition period of the implementation of an online notary platform.
And is there kind of a common first step for lenders of the thing they don't have? Or are they trying to run before they walk in many cases of, let's just get this whole digital closing thing run, and they don't even have an e-vault yet?
Yeah, I think the first step is always the educational tool, and that became, again, an area space where we were providing, because a lot of people are interested in, having some type of transition into remote online notarization. However, the educational process, right? You don't want to pull a plug and say, we're going to shift all this over without having the necessary tools. We see that happen in COVID, and it was unbelievable. I had title companies like, I'm going to send you like 15 files to do online. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
First of all, do your underwriter approve online notarization? And if so, what platform does the underwriter approve? What about the lender? Have the lender approved these closings to be completed? I had people saying, well, can you just do it on Zoom and Google Meets? I was like, that's not how remote online, that's how REN worked, because a lot of governors put in this remote ink, law to help ease some of that. But it came back to us just doing basic educational resources, conversations about how these things work.
You just gave me like 5 questions from that answer. I love it. So RON versus REN. Right.
Yeah.
So REN is basically if you don't have an e-note, right? If you want a digital signature for something that isn't ultimately an electronic mortgage.
Correct. And REN birth came more around during COVID with a lot of states who hadn't even, completed the online notarization law. So we have remote ink where we can virtually come in a Zoom and we can watch the signer sign, and then, you can notarize and stamp and send it back. However, the note can be, FedEx overnight to that person and get the original signature. So REN definitely did play a key component in the COVID world. However, again, a traditional notary could do REN, but a commission online notary could only do RON.
And are there more REN signings happening now than RON?
There's a possibility of that, because REN was able to override the systems that are in place for RON, the structure that's in place for RON. However, I think a lot of the state laws expired with REN, because REN, again, allowed the notary to utilize these temporary platforms without the security that RON has to do the verification of identification.
Do you think REN would serve now as a stepping stone to RON, or is it just more of a crutch that actually may hurt?
Well, I think it's a crutch that actually may hurt because of the principles of RON, again, with the identification verification and the security behind a remote online notary platform. There's a confusion of that. And I think RON intentions are to always verify ID first. That's what notarization is. We're verifying that person is who they say they are. Where in REN, this crutch that allowed us to sign these documents in this executive orders that was put in place, it wavers around the KBA process and the structure there. So you are leaning strictly on the notary acting in integrity to perform this notarization without any type of fraud, a possible fraud.
And for a notary to get commissioned to do RON, what's required on their end?
So they would definitely have to go through their, Secretary of State to register it as an online notary, to make sure that they're able, they're in good commission, they're meeting the state requirements. There are some states who have approved remote online notary platforms. So those are the only platforms that state would allow an online notary to utilize. So getting the commission through their state is, the first step in making sure that there are good standards and having those requirements up front.
And are those the digital closing platforms like a Notarize, or is it different? What do you mean in terms of platforms, and what are the kind of ones that you're seeing lenders use?
Yes, so you do have platforms like a state, I think it may be Michigan, who actually specify you can only use 5 of these platforms, whether they be Nexus or Notarize. These are platforms that these states have outlined that a notary can only utilize. And so it's left up to the notary to onboard to the platform and then submit the application to the state. As far as the lender goes, again, that's kind of like on the lender. What exactly does this platform provide the lender to, utilize for his notes and e-notes and MERS, things like that.
And then you had mentioned before the underwriter having to kind of approve what the signature is. So that will be underwriter specific, state specific. Is that where an area you see underwriters really catching up, or is it just all over the place in terms of what's approved?
Well, I think, each underwriter have their own house rules as far as
Yeah.
what they will and will not approve as far as the online notarization platform or
Mhm.
service providers, actually. And so that being said, the underwriters have done due diligence to do their homework to assure that we are getting e-signatures, the notarizations, and then they're kind of collaborating along with our lenders to make sure that, when the notary is given these actual signings, there is no kickback from the documents itself. So each underwriter I've seen have kind of pretty much came up with their own systems of what they wanted, what they
Right.
want Ron to look like.
Which probably isn't a good thing.
I hope for a centralization somewhere. I think in a perfect world, Ron would be federal instead of state law. And on a federal law, we get an intercompact of services that we can provide and it help flow, the workflow of a lot of the process.
So we need like czar of Ron, Melissa Johnson Eldridge, done.
Yes.
Go by to the call, see what we can happen. Oh, there's so much to back here. I feel like I've learned a lot more about it. Coming out of COVID, do you see the industry kind of using it to boost adoption, or almost taking a step back now that people can actually get in the same room again? I remember early on in COVID, people did like drive-through closings, right? Where they put stuff on the hood of the car, someone signed it, walked away, the other person signed documents.
Yeah, it was, we went through a warp of a time zone.
Yeah.
I think Ron have always been here to stay, simply because I think COVID taught us that having a plan B, C, D is what any industry or agency should have. So we would not become crippled, whether it was, COVID here in Texas, we had that bad winter storm that hit, where there was power outages. I think having something in place where business can continue, Ron, is that what you would need, whether your client is out of the state or out of the country, work must go on. So I believe that Ron is here to stay. And I believe COVID proved to a lot of our agencies and lenders that you need is not if I need it or if I want it, is really that you need this to keep business going.
I remember from my title agent days, just finding notaries could be half the struggle sometimes. If it's end of the month, I need you to get to, this rural area or wherever it may be. I think that, and Ron is definitely a nice way of solving that, obviously, too.
Absolutely.
You don't have to travel as much. Notaries are doing the things that they're meant to do ultimately, and more closings at the end of the day. If they're able to do that. I know that people love to jump ahead, especially futurists, of we're going to eliminate title agents, we're going to eliminate realtors, we're going to eliminate loan officers. And I feel like notaries are a very unsung part of the process, because they're so important, because if you don't get things signed correctly, you don't have things transfer, no one moves in, no one gets paid, it cripples the entire process.
Absolutely.
Why aren't notaries going away? How do you kind of see the future of notaries kind of happen in the future, 10, 20 years? We're getting the crystal ball right now. And
Jim, I'm so glad you're bringing this conversation to light, because I think until COVID hit, a lot of the industry partners hadn't realized how important the notary is to the closing process. Yes, they know we need a notary to go out and perform these closings, whether it be mobile. However, the notary to remote online notarization is the key component. And one of the things that I educate platforms that I consult with all the time, software is great, but the software cannot work without having educated resource for notaries, online notaries. And so providing that training for those notaries is a necessity to the success of any remote online notary platform. Notaries will always be a part of this equation, because they are the seal of this document. And so including the notaries into the online notarization process and the online notarization conversations is the key component. component. Building anything without the notaries will leave you at a standstill. So they will, it's so important that the industry, I think, gravitate to the notaries, value the notaries, and, again, focus on the training and the educational side of this, because this is where your document will stop. This is the last person who will have your document, and you want to be able to provide as much value there as possible.
Well, you talk about, amplifying and leveraging what notaries can do by having technical solutions like this. They're IDing folks, confirming identification, eliminating wire fraud, which is so rampant in the industry, opposed to paying notaries to drive from one place to another, which is a lot of what is done nowadays. So it's just like anything else of leveraging technology so people can be more efficient and do the best aspect of their job. We see that with loan officers building a relationship opposed to just asking what's your credit score, what's your address, what's your loan amount. So it's nice to see how you're really pushing education and technology to amplify what notaries can do in the future.
Yes, I believe that. And, it was one of the things that when we dove into this era of, educating the notaries, we produced our first book back in 2019 of Remote Online Notary Training System, because we quickly acknowledged and recognized that there is a missing niche in this industry. And a lot of partners focus on the software, and there's a huge learning curve with moving from traditional to online. And I don't, highlighting that, it's like, hey, this can happen and it can work, but we must first educate and train in order to have the successful outcome. More importantly, our consumers need to be educated on this process, other than just saying, hey, here's a link, click into it, and then you can do your online notarization, right? Well, then we ran into things like consumers need to know, what is a KBA? How do I verify myself electronically? What all do I need? What type of software, hardware? Can I do this from my phone? There is just a huge gap in just educating everyone.
I don't even know what a KBA is.
It's a knowledge-based assessment.
Okay.
And so those are things that remote online notary platforms require signers to do to verify your ID or IDV. There's this, so in that space by itself, we was like, yeah, it sounds amazing. And to give a customer the best experience, if you educate them first, prior to them getting on board, then you've already set the expectations. We're probably at least 90% of these would turn out very successfully.
Yeah, and I think you have the opportunity with online notarizations for people to be even more skeptical than they would in person of, I don't know, I don't want to put my information online, I don't trust this, I don't know what's going on right here, I can't do this right now, or something like that. So I think there's in some ways probably even more friction that you're dealing with in that regard.
Absolutely. And those are the things that, lenders want to assure that, hey, if I, introduce this to my client, would my client, would this be frustrating for them? Will they have a great experience? Because let's think about a closing experience should be a celebratory time, not a frustrating time. And so we want to make sure that, again, when you have trained notaries and we've set the expectations for the clients or the customers themselves, you're more likely to have a better outcome. But
and who is responsible for training the customer in your mind? Is it the notary platform, the notary, the lender, title agent, all of the above?
I think we all play a key role. I think, from the beginning with a lender, if you introduce this as an option, right? Hey, you have an option to, remotely close your documents for this particular one. Are you interested in doing that remotely? Sure. What does it require? Just a little preliminary. You need a computer and some internet, and then it kind of flows down to title and reiterating that, what to expect from that. And then it flows down to the software, providing how to log into the software itself, those type of instructions. And then when you get to the notary introduced themselves themselves. So I think we all have a key role. I think the importance of that process is that the communication has to start between the lender, the title, and the signing services itself, and we all come and build that workflow process. So those are things that we've done with our clients, titles and lenders we work with. And again, we see just a huge success from that.
It seems like that's also another place where you can really leverage technology with videos, with resources online, with things like that, explaining exactly what to expect through every step of the process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The thing is too, Jim, we see a lot of videos out there. If you go to YouTube and you see so many people talking about remote online notarization and platforms and things like that. And you may even see, individual notaries talking about online notarization from their perspective. But when we're talking about online notarization as a joint collaboration, this is where we get into the details of who does what and appointing those roles and responsibilities to help everyone ease into this solution. So again, regardless of what platform you're utilizing, you have a solution for your customers at the end of the day.
Right. And the technology is one thing, but actually understanding everyone's role. You can implement technology and it can be a disaster if no one knows how to use it.
Exactly. Absolutely. You hit it home.
Well, this was incredibly enlightening on the Ron side. I think one thing too I wanted to ask is this, the title industry, the mortgage industry, they've called itself pale, male, and stale. Constantly, right? And I'm sure notaries have an older age, title agents do, lenders do, realtors do. As someone who is neither pale, stale, male, how have you found the industry changing and things that you've seen, and what gets you excited every day when you're going into the NEMA office?
We live in a world where things are everlasting changing. And I encourage my team to look at things as change, be flexible, be adaptable, because we're in an unforeseen time with, Ron and COVID or weather and changes, nature. You don't know. So the thing that keeps us excited daily is that, we may interact with a title company that say, hey, I'm interested in it, and I always tell my team, if you have one that's interested, whether it's a title, a lender, or a notary, we understand, they give us that light to say, yeah, we're doing something right. And we interact with so many different title and lenders every day, just to hear them come to NEMA and say, hey, can you help us out? Or can you point us in the right direction? Or if you can build a workflow, can you beta test our platform? NEMA have put together beta testing teams nationwide for, platforms coming onto the RON era. And so we're excited to continue to work in that space and, work with these platforms who really value notaries' perspective.
So it sounds like be adaptable, be open-minded, and be ready for change.
Be ready for change. Right. One of the things I train my notaries, we don't get ready, we stay ready. So we always reading and staying ahead of the curve.
No, I really like that. Well, this has been incredibly informative. Is there anything that you wanted to address that I missed, or anything else before we wrap up here?
Not at all, Jim. I really enjoyed this session. And hey, I think we should probably do another one of these sessions.
Absolutely. I'm sure there's going to be more acronyms we don't understand in about
right.
a year. So really excited for that. Well, Melissa, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Jim. You guys have a great one.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Lodestore's Lending Leaders. I'd like to give a special thanks to Brian Rieger and Elena Gardner, who help us create this podcast every week. Please remember to like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps us a lot. Thanks. Talk to you next week.